Hey folks, how's it going? This video is going to be about the layoffs that are coming through the end of the year and into next year, and how we need to be really prepping for these layoffs. There's going to be a massive increase in them. I read an article this morning on Forbes that listed all of the different layoffs that had been announced since the beginning of the year. And it's an enormous list. It's just there's like 21 pages worth of, if I printed it out, it would be 21 pages long. But I'm just going to go over some of the ones that were announced just since November 1st. And then I want to go into another article that I found. You can read this article for yourself. The link is going to be down below. But it's really important that we understand what's just happened just in the last month, and that this is going to be a trend that continues through the end of the year and into next year. All right, beginning in November 1st, Chime will lay off 12% of its staff, with cuts expected to affect 160 of the company's 1,300 employees. Zendesk is planning to lay off roughly 350 employees. Salesforce cut fewer than 1,000 employees Monday, and it's reportedly planning to lay off roughly 2,500 of the company's 72,223 employees, roughly 3.5% of its workforce. Meta confirmed the social media company will lay off 13% of its workforce, which is 11,000 employees. Redfin announced it would cut 13% of its staff, 862 employees, while another 218 employees whose roles were eliminated will be given new positions within the company. The second round of layoffs in recent months following its decision to cut 8% of its staff back in June. Citigroup is cutting 50 trading employees, following the lead of Goldman Sachs, SoftBank, and Wells Fargo, which all implemented major job cuts earlier this year. Barclays started laying off roughly 200 employees in its banking and trading departments this week. Jewel announced the layoffs, which are expected to affect roughly 30% of its workforce. Asana announced the software company will lay off 9% of its workforce, roughly 230 of the company's 2,560 employees. Amazon is planning to lay off as many as 10,000 employees. Cisco's job cuts could affect up to roughly 4,100 workers, roughly 5% of the company's 83,000 employees. Roku is to eliminate roughly 7% of its U.S. workforce, roughly 200 employees. Neuro, the San Francisco Bay Area company, is planning to cut 20% of its workforce. Carvana is cutting roughly 8% of its workforce. HP plans to reduce its global headcount by approximately 4,000 to 6,000 employees by the end of 2025. That's key right there, because this is not just over the next few months, hoping to recover sometime toward the end of next year. This is going all the way through 2025, so they're looking way ahead. Let's see. Upstart's layoffs are expected to affect roughly 7% of the cloud-based AI's lending company's workforce. Open Door is laying off 18% of its workforce, blaming it on the most challenging real estate market in 40 years. Of course, everybody knows about Musk laying off as much as 50% of Twitter's employees. Stripe announced plans to cut 14% of its workforce, roughly 1,120 of its 8,000 positions. Lyft will reportedly lay off 13% of its staff, according to a letter from company officials obtained by CNBC. With job cuts affecting approximately 650 employees, roughly 13% of its staff, marking the company's second round of layoffs this year after it laid off 60 workers in July. And the list continues. AMC Network has announced a round of large-scale layoffs in a memo. They haven't given any details on exactly how many positions that's going to be. DoorDash said the food delivery company is not immune to the external challenges. No number on how many jobs they're going to cut. Cryptocurrency exchange Kraken will let go 1,100 employees, roughly 30% of its workforce. H&M announced job cuts expected to affect 1,500 employees, less than 1% of the company's 155,000 employees. CNN is in the midst of laying off a lot of staff, no specification on how many. Gannett, the parent company of USA Today, the Detroit Free Press, Indianapolis Star, and Cincinnati Enquirer, began laying off employees, estimated to affect 6% of the company's 3,400-person media division. PepsiCo was reporting eliminating hundreds of jobs at headquarters in Chicago, Purchase, New York, and Plano, Texas. BuzzFeed CEO Jonah Peretti announced the media outlet will cut 180 employees. Morgan Stanley layoffs, first reported by CNBC, citing unnamed sources, could affect around 1,600 of the more than 81,000 people employed by the company. Plaid will lay off 260 employees amid slower than expected growth. Adobe could be cutting roughly 100 employees from its sales department. All right, now, those are just the ones that have been announced from November 1st to today. If you go look at this list, this is a fraction of the companies that are laying off. Again, I've started to print out the entire article, but when I saw it was going to take 21 pages to print it out, it's like, no, I can't do that. You know, there's no point. So if you want to continue reading the article, the link is down below. A couple other things that I wanted to go over. There are another article that I was reading. 3 of the top Wall Street banks are predicting the U.S. stocks could fall more than 20% within the next year. For Bank of America, they're predicting a Federal Reserve-induced liquidity crisis could put pressure on the S&P 500. Meanwhile, Morgan Stanley and Deutsche Bank say lower earning outlooks and a U.S. recession could trigger the sell-off. All right, the next article that I wanted to talk about comes from CNBC again. Jim Cramer says he expects many layoffs at companies after Christmas. I'm not a big fan of Jim Cramer, to be honest with you. But it's important to note that all this information about layoffs is coming from multiple sources. A growing number of companies across industries have curtailed their headcounts this year in an effort to control their expenses in a dipping economy. PepsiCo is one of the latest companies to downsize following cuts at food and beverage peers Beyond Meat, Impossible Foods, and rival Coca-Cola. The rate of layoff announcement at U.S. employers last month was more than 5 times greater than the year prior. So that's another key thing, is that there were more layoff announcements just last month than in 2021. And I know a lot of people will say, well, yeah, in 2021, a lot of people were still locked down, a lot of people were still at home because of the pandemic, but just think of the scale of that even through that, there were a few layoffs, but just in the last month, there have been more layoffs than in all of 2021. That's kind of mind-boggling. Okay, it goes on. Let's see, tech companies whose astronomical growth in recent years has been derailed by the Federal Reserve's interest rate hikes led last month's layoffs. Yet the total number of layoffs this year is the second lowest since the company started tracking metrics in 1993. Cramer attributed the lack of job cuts to the fact that many companies have managed to stay afloat, a fact that could change next year. Even the most marginal, newly public enterprises just keep chugging along. You'd think some of these SPAC names would run out of money soon, he said. So it's my belief, judging from what I'm seeing in the news, what I'm seeing on all these media websites, and what I've experienced with my own employer and other companies that I'm seeing, there have been a massive amount of layoffs this year with no real end in sight. And we all know that after Christmas, after the holidays, is like the hardest time for a lot of companies, because they've already made their biggest profits for the year. You know, Christmas, especially if you're talking about retail, Christmas is the big holiday, you know, and that's when a lot of companies make their most money. And it's in the following months, January, February, March, what have you, spending goes down considerably because everybody's already spent so much leading up to Christmas. That in the first 2 or 3 months of the year, they're not really spending a lot, because, you know, everybody's putting Christmas presents and stuff on credit cards. You know, you got to pay all these bills and everything. So there's money going to that, not necessarily to retail and other sources. So it's my belief that there's not an end in sight right now for these layoffs. And if predictions are true that the stock market falls another 20% or more next year, you can expect even more layoffs, if not a lot of bankruptcies from these companies, because they're not going to be able to keep hemorrhaging money out. They're not going to be able to afford to keep losing money and not paying their bills. Companies have bills to pay just like we do, only their bills are a lot bigger. So this is a trend that I don't see ending anytime soon. So while you have the time, while you have the ability, you really need to be prepping for all of these job losses. There's a lot of them now. There's going to be more later. It's just, we're going to have a rough year next year. Economically and financially speaking, we're going to have a very rough year next year. So do what you need to do. You need to be stocking food, putting food back as much as possible. I don't care how you have to do it. I don't go out and get you a part-time job, get you a second job. Grow whatever you can, barter for what you can. Go hunting, go fishing, go foraging, what have you. Find a way to put food back. You're gonna need it. Pay off your debt. If you have good income coming in, pay off your debt. Avoid taking on any new debt. And if there's any way possible, put money back. And I'm not talking about in the stock market. I'm not talking about buying investments. You want to, oh, just saw a hawk fly right over me. Huh. Okay, so you want to do all of these things. You want to pay down your debt. You want to stock food. You want to stock water. Don't have all your money in one place, because if you got it all in the stock market and the stock market does fall, you're going to lose a lot. So get it out of the stock market. It's okay to have a little bit in there. I'm not going to be one of these people tell you not to invest. But if you do invest in the stock market, you better know exactly what you're doing and what you're buying. And you better not have all of your money in the stock market. You want to have that spread out in multiple locations, because if the stock market does go down, you don't want to lose everything you've got. Anyway, that's all I've got. I hope you found this useful. I appreciate you guys watching. Like, share, subscribe if you haven't. That's it, folks. Just, well, it's always going back to the same thing. Keep prepping. Don't get complacent. Stay busy. Get things done. Until next time, folks. Take care. I'll catch you later.